The Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Enterprise Incident, premiered on September 26, 1968. The episode is from Season 3 and is Episode 2. Written by D.C. Fontana and directed by John Merideth Lucas. Special stars included Joanne Linville as the Romulan commander and Jack Donner as Sub Commander Tal. Unfortunately, Joanne Linville passed away on June 20th, 2021, at the age of 93. Mark Leonard was the original Romulan commander, but he passed away on November 22nd of 1996 at the age of 72. This would leave Jack Donner as the only remaining leading Romulan from Star Trek The Original Series. Donner would recall the trouble the makeup department had on keeping the Romulan ears on, and when he shook his head, they would fall off. It was later decided that the supporting Romulans would wear a type of helmet that concealed their ears to avoid this problem. This episode would mark the second time we see the Romulans, the first time since Season 1's episode, Balance of Terror. When it was the Romulans using the Klingon battle cruiser design, William Shatner would explain that it was a budgetary reason. Shatner said that the show had invested heavily into the design of the Klingon warship, and it needed to justify the expense. Instead of spending on another Romulan ship, it was decided that the Romulans would be using the Klingon designs for their ships, the main difference being the bird of prey painted on them. He goes on to say that the ship was used only 3 times in the original series, however, it would be modified for the feature films. William Shatner would also recall that the cloaking device was made up of 2 pieces. The top of the device was from a space probe named Nomad from the episode The Changeling, and the bottom part was made from the sphere that housed the consciousness of Sargon from the episode Return to Tomorrow. Leonard Nimoy would recall that the television series Mission Impossible was being shot next door to Star Trek at Desilu Studios, and that it might have influenced the episode, The Enterprise Incident. Nimoy goes on to say that this episode was Star Trek's take on Mission Impossible. The episode would open on stardate 5027.3. Dr. McCoy would be recording a log about his concern for Captain Kirk. He would say that Captain Kirk was showing signs of fatigue, increasing tension, and emotional stress. McCoy seemed to think that they had been on patrol for too long without a rest or a break. We see Captain Kirk on a bridge appearing agitated, first with Mr. Chekhov and then with Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock's scan of the surrounding space of 1/2 parsec would indicate all clear. Then Captain Kirk would order a course change to come about to 185 Mark III, which would put the Enterprise through the Romulan neutral zone and into Romulan space. Mr. Spock would increase the area scan to 1 parsec, and there would still be no contact. There were concerned looks from the bridge crew, but they would comply with the captain's orders. This included Mr. Scott asking Lieutenant Uhura when the order to cross into the neutral zone from Starfleet was given. She said that there was no such order. That is when a Romulan ship appeared, and Mr. Scott made the observation that it was a Klingon ship and that it was impossible for that area. Mr. Spock said that intelligence reported that the Romulans were using the Klingon ship design. 2 more Romulan ships would appear, and the Enterprise would be completely surrounded. Captain Kirk would order Lieutenant Uhura to transmit all ships' logs to Starfleet advising them of the situation. The Enterprise would then be contacted by Sub Commander Tal. He would demand a complete surrender of the ship and the crew, and of course Captain Kirk would not allow that. He said that he would blow the ship up if they attempted to board it. Sub Commander Tal would give Captain Kirk 1 hour to comply. Later in the briefing room, while comparing or sizing up the Romulan ships, Mr. Spock said that his theory was that the Romulans had developed a cloaking device that rendered the sensors useless, a definite threat to the Federation. Captain Kirk said that they had 3 choices. The first was to fight and probably be destroyed, the second to blow the Enterprise up themselves, or 3, surrender. Mr. Scott objected right away to the third one, stating that if the Romulans got the Enterprise, they would know everything they needed to know about a starship. It would be Mr. Spock that would point out later that if the captain had not ordered them into the neutral zone in the first place, he would not need their opinions. Dr. McCoy would add that he had no authority, but he was immediately dismissed by Captain Kirk from the meeting. Sub Commander Tal would contact the ship again and state that his commander wished to speak to Captain Kirk and his first officer. Sub Commander Tal requested that they beam over to their ship, and after a simultaneous exchange of Romulan officers for Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, they were brought to meet the Romulan commander aboard the Romulan flagship. The Romulan commander was a woman, and she would speak with Captain Kirk first and ask him what his mission was. He said that instrument failure altered their course and they were across the neutral zone before they knew it. He said that they were immediately surrounded before they could turn back. It was clear that the Romulan commander did not believe him and accused him of espionage. She would call in Mr. Spock and inform him of the captain's statement. She said that she was surprised to see him serving. She would later tell Captain Kirk that the Romulans considered Vulcans distant brothers. She would then ask Spock if it was a myth that a Vulcan could not tell a lie, and he honestly replied that it was no myth. She asked him what their mission was on his honor. Mr. Spock replied, "I reserve the privilege to speak only when it will not violate my honor as a Vulcan." The Romulan commander told him that it was unworthy of a Vulcan to resort to subterfuge, and Mr. Spock responded by saying that the commander was being clever, and that was not worthy of a Romulan. He would also go on to say that it was not a lie to keep the truth to oneself. The commander said, there is a truth. She went on to accuse Captain Kirk of knowing about the cloaking device and trying to steal it. She said that there were no tactics that could be used on Vulcans to get them to talk. However, there were methods for humans that were most effective. Mr. Spock said she would not resort to them as they would be ineffective against the captain. Mr. Spock would later say that he could not watch Captain Kirk destroy himself any further. He told the commander that on his orders they cross into the neutral zone and that he had not been himself for weeks. Despite being ordered to shut up by Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock would say that he cannot allow the thought of crossing into the neutral zone was an order given by Starfleet. As he stated, their rapid capture was an obvious result of its foolhardiness. He said the captain crossed over due to his craving for glory and told the Romulan commander that he was not sane. That being said, the Romulan commander would contact the Enterprise and inform them that Captain Kirk was being charged with espionage. She said Mr. Spock gave a statement saying that the Enterprise was not under Federation orders to cross into the neutral zone, and she said that Mr. Scott would follow the Romulan flagship so they could be processed and then released. Mr. Scott immediately had the Romulan officers thrown into the brig. He went on to say to the Romulan commander that the Enterprise takes no orders except those from Captain Kirk, and he also said that if they attempted to board or commandeer the Enterprise, he would blow it up and take as many of them as possible. Captain Kirk would later be put into the Romulan brig, and Spock would tell the Romulan commander that he was half human, but he called himself Vulcan. He told her that he had been in Starfleet for 18 years, and she asked him why he was never given a command. He said he did not desire a ship of his own, but she had pointed out that none had ever been offered to him. She told him that if he were to join her, she would give him a command of his own ship. The Romulan commander said that bringing home the Enterprise would be an achievement of a lifetime, and that it would broaden her power considerably. Later, as Captain Kirk would be thrown into the brig, he would get up and storm and charge the door, which would activate the force field and render him unconscious. Dr. McCoy would be called over to the Romulan flagship to check on him. He said that he would recover, but would need more attention. While the Romulan commander and Mr. Spock went to the brig, she would ask him to join her for dinner. And once in the brig, Dr. McCoy would inform the commander of the condition of Captain Kirk. He said that the captain was mentally depressed, physically weak, disoriented, and displayed feelings of personal persecution and rebellion. After hearing this, the Romulan commander asked if he was competent and if it could have been affecting him earlier. She asked Dr. McCoy if it was possible that this could have caused him to enter the Romulan neutral zone, Dr. McCoy said it was possible. The commander would turn to Mr. Spock and say that the doctor has confirmed his statement. She said command would fall on Mr. Spock and wanted to know if he was ready. He said he was ready, much to Dr. McCoy's disapproval. Captain Kirk would then threaten to kill Mr. Spock and then suddenly get up and attack him. Mr. Spock would grab him and grip him over his face, causing the captain to fall to the floor. Dr. McCoy wanted to know what he had done to him. Spock said that he was unprepared for his attack and that he instinctively used the Vulcan death grip. Dr. McCoy would then pronounce the captain dead. Later, back on the Enterprise in sickbay, the body of Captain Kirk was on a table. His body had been returned after the Romulans certified him as dead. Nurse Chapel would be shocked to see his eyes open. Dr. McCoy said that Spock and Jim were under orders from Starfleet, and he did not even know until he went to the Romulan ship himself. Once revived, Captain Kirk said that he was to remain dead as far as the rest of the crew were concerned, and he would have to be the one to take the blame to keep the Federation off the hook if anything went wrong. He would then have Dr. McCoy alter his appearance to make him pass as a Romulan. He would pose as a Romulan Centurion. Meanwhile, on a Romulan ship, the commander would have special Vulcan dishes prepared for Mr. Spock. The commander would continue to try to recruit Mr. Spock to join her in the Romulan Empire so he could find his place with her. Not hearing from Mr. Spock, Captain Kirk felt he had no choice but to beam over to the Romulan flagship to search for the cloaking device. The only contact by Spock to Kirk would occur when the commander would go change into something more feminine to appease Mr. Spock. Spock told him of the location of the cloaking device and that he did not know if he'd be able to get back to the Enterprise safely. The signal would be noticed on the Romulan bridge and Sub Commander Tal was notified. By this time, Captain Kirk had found the cloaking device and was attempting to prepare it to take it to the Enterprise. The guards, along with Sub Commander Tal, would inform the commander in their quarters of the transmission. Mr. Spock would come and offer up his communicator. She then looked at the guards and she said, "The cloaking device. Bring him." As they began walking towards the cloaking device area, Captain Kirk had subdued another Romulan guard and had taken the cloaking device and beamed aboard the Enterprise. Once the commander and sub-commander arrived with the guards, Mr. Spock, they all noticed that the device was gone. She ordered a search of all decks, and Mr. Spock said he believed it would be profitless, that he did not believe that they would find it. The commander said to Mr. Spock, "You must be mad." He told her, "I am quite sane." She asked him who he was that he could do that to her. And this is one of my favorite lines of the episode. Mr. Spock would reply, "First officer of the Enterprise." She would then slap his face as she began to realize that the cloaking device had been taken by the Federation. Back on the Enterprise, Mr. Scott was frantically trying to install the cloaking device in the Enterprise. Captain Kirk would make his presence known on the bridge, and he would order Mr. Chekhov to man the sensors and find Mr. Spock so they could beam him over. While back on a Romulan ship, Mr. Spock was demanding his right of statement before his execution, and the commander would grant it. After being granted, he began to speak. That is when Mr. Chekhov would find him, the Enterprise would lock on, and they would beam him back. Sensing this, the Romulan commander would throw her arms around him, and she was beamed over with him. Once they were there, Captain Kirk gave the order to head back to Federation space at Warp 9. The Romulans would give chase, and Captain Kirk would inform Sub Commander Tal that the commander was aboard the Enterprise, but she would yell in order for him to destroy the ship. Mr. Scott would later, in a second attempt, throw the switch, and in a beautiful scene, the Enterprise would disappear as she became fully cloaked. The Romulans would fire their disruptors, but would miss as the Enterprise changed course, and Mr. Spock informed the captain that even the Romulans could not track a cloaked ship. Later on, Dr. McCoy would call the bridge and inform Captain Kirk that he was doing surgery, that he was going to bop his ears. And he would ask if he wanted to go through life looking like his first officer. Looking horrified, Captain Kirk said, "I'll be right there." Mr. Spock said, "Please go, Captain. Somehow, they do not look as aesthetically agreeable on humans."